Picher, Oklahoma is a ghost town in northeastern Oklahoma in Ottawa County, United States. Once a booming mining community and now largely abandoned due to environmental disaster. The population at peak was around 14 to 20,000 during its mining heyday. By 2010, just about 20 residents remained before the town was emptied. It was founded after the lead and zinc were discovered in 1913. Picher quickly grew around mining operations and became a major producer of these metals, especially during World War I and World War II. For decades, underground mining and the dumping of waste rock called chet created huge piles of toxic tailings and undermined the land. Decades of mining left the ground unstable, groundwater contaminated, and lead-laced dust widespread. The US EPA added the area to the Tar Creek Superfund site, one of the most serious hazardous waste cleanups in the nation. Studies found high rates of lead poisoning, particularly among children, linked to pollution from chet piles and contaminated soil. In May of 2008, an EF4 tornado devastated much of Picher, destroying homes and killing several residents, accelerating the town's decline. A federal and state buyout program encouraged residents to leave because of the health and safety concerns. City operations officially ended in September of 2009, and the municipality was dissolved in 2013. Very few structures remain today. Most homes and businesses were demolished, and the land remains part of an ongoing cleanup effort. Today, Picher stands as a cautionary example of the environmental and health consequences of unregulated industrial mining. The area is still contaminated and undergoing long-term remediation under federal and tribal leadership. Before Picher became a mining boomtown, the land was occupied by Native American people for thousands of years. Long before Europeans and U.S. government arrived, later, several tribal nations were forcibly moved into the region by the U.S. government's Indian removal policies in the 1800s. Ancient indigenous cultures, long before European settlement, the area that became Picher was part of a landscape used by prehistoric Native American cultures, including archaic, woodland, and plains village peoples who lived, hunted, and farmed in the northeastern Oklahoma for thousands of years. Tribes relocated to the Indian Territory in the 1830s, and afterwards, the U.S. government forced many tribes from the eastern and midwestern United States into what was then called Indian Territory, now Oklahoma. These included the Quapaw, Shawnee, Peoria, Kaskaskia, Miami, Ottawa, Wyandot, Iroquois groups, and I may not have pronounced those correctly. These tribes were often moved from their homelands under pressure from expanding white settlement and treaties that ceded their lands to the U.S. government. By the early 1900s, much of the land around present-day Picher was Quapaw reservation land. When rich deposits in lead and zinc were discovered around 1913, mining companies wanted access to that land. Some Quapaw landowners agreed to lease their land to mining companies in exchange for royalties, hoping for economic benefit. Other tribal members refused, but the Bureau of Indian Affairs sometimes stepped in and declared them incompetent so leases could go forward, a practice that often undermined tribal rights and consent. Displacement and loss of control. Many Native people who called and lived that land found themselves pushed aside as mining expanded, although the Quapaw retained some land and later regained much of the territory. Their control was limited while mining was active. The environmental damage from mining, soil, water, and air polluted with lead, zinc, and other toxins affected tribal homelands and nearby communities. Cleanup and health concerns have continued long after mining ended. Today, the Quapaw Nation plays a leading role in the cleanup effort at Tar Creek, working with the EPA to remediate the land and protect public health, something that took decades to develop after the mining era was over. Instead of being untouched before mining, the Picher area had a long indigenous history and was home to tribes after forced relocation. When mining began, many native people lost control over their lands and were pressured into deals that benefited mining companies more than the tribes themselves. Today, tribal nations, especially the Quapaw, are actively involved in efforts to repair some of that damage. Lessons that should be learned? Well, the most important lesson people should learn is that an entire town was sacrificed for profit, and the consequences were ignored for generations. Children were poisoned, and it was known. The land itself was broken beyond safe repair. Indigenous land was exploited not once, but twice. Disaster became the excuse, not the cause. Cleanup came only after abandonment. The core lesson: Picher isn't just a ghost town story, it's a warning. What happens when profit outweighs people? What happens when rural and indigenous communities are ignored? And what happens when environmental damage is treated as someone else's problem? Picher should be taught as a moral failure, not just a historical curiosity.